Hey guys, so I wanted to do a quick little few points on saddle fitting and how to check if your saddle is a reasonable fit for your horse. Of course, you need to consult with saddle fitters, experts, professionals that know what they're doing, but I've seen a lot of people misled, especially lately, by said professionals, people you're supposed to be able to trust. So I wanted to give you a few things to kind of be able to just double check that everything looks right. That way you know enough to know when something's not right. So first off, we need to know the horse's back. I'm going to do my best to video this for you. She doesn't have a real prominent shoulder blade, but if you feel your horse's shoulder blade, you should be able to feel the back of it right here. Your saddle should sit behind that shoulder blade at least a couple of fingers width, depending on what kind of flap you have. If you have a jumping saddle, your flap may come over it, but the tree itself needs to sit at least 2 to 3 fingers behind that shoulder blade. Next, you need to identify your horse's wither. She has a rather low wither. If they have a really tall wither, of course, you're going to have to worry about clearance on top. You cannot have any pressure along the spine anywhere, period. But also, most people miss this. You can't have pressure along the side of the wither. There's a few muscles and nerves here that are really important. If you actually dig in here, most of the time you will lock your horse's front feet up. They won't be able to walk. Please don't chew on my saddle. So you do need to watch out for the side of the wither, not just the bony part. There needs to be a nice clearance over the full spine. So this whole area here is not weight bearing. The spinal processes, however you want to say that, they stick out here, and that's where the muscles attach to. And those bony points are very sensitive. So your saddle should not sit on top of the spine or on the sides of the spine. It should sit on the muscle through here. And the furthest back your saddle can go, you need to find your horse's last rib. You can generally feel it by just pressing in from this flank here. You find that last rib, you follow it up to where it meets the spine. Her last rib is a little bit hard to tell up here in the fattier, muscly part, but right about here, this is her last rib. This is the last thoracic vertebrae. From here on out is lumbar vertebrae. They cannot support the weight of a rider or a saddle. The kidneys are under here. There's no ribs to support the back, so you'd be putting all that pressure onto the false ribs. Oh dear, somebody's shooting. Onto the false ribs and risking a lot of damage, including fused spine and all kinds of issues. So your saddle cannot fit anywhere except for this little band. It's a small space of weight-bearing surface from here to the back of the shoulder blade. If you hit the shoulder blade, you'll break that cartilage off. You'll cause tremendous pain and all kinds of ossification. It's just ugly. So you can't fit a saddle here. You can't fit a saddle back here. You can't fit a saddle up here. Okay? So that's what we got to work with. I'm going to swing the camera for a moment here. I'm going to set my saddle up on her back. So when you first set your saddle up, it's best to set it up on the wither just a little. Give it a gentle rock and a shake until it kind of finds home. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this saddle's just a touch too wide for my mare right now. She's lost some weight over the winter, which is a good thing. She was a little chubby, but she doesn't have a lot of muscle because I've not been riding. So there's a little space in here that's going to get filled up. And part of the way I can tell that this saddle is a slight bit bigger than I want is normally when I do this shimmy, 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 it'll stop right about there. And that's right behind her shoulder blade. And, okay, if you check from the side, this is a dressage saddle. Most cantles will be high. This dressage saddle is going to be extra high. But you want to check for where the dip of your seat is. You want to check the comparison pommel to cantle to see your overall balance. This is an exaggeration, but that's an extremely low in the front saddle versus this would be extremely high in the front on a lot of your quarter horses because they're built kind of downhill, rump high, withers low. Your saddle's going to be maybe slightly more slanted than you want, but you want to try to aim for the seat having the deepest part right in the middle. As you can see, this balance really isn't too bad. It's slightly, maybe a quarter of an inch too far forward for my liking. And when I cinch it down, it does get a little bit exaggerated. So I'll show you how I've been fixing it as a temporary measure while she gains weight and fattens back up, builds this muscle back. Second point I immediately check is wither clearance. Let's see if we can get down in here. You can see there's a channel all the way through the gullet. No spine contact anywhere. Oakley's nibbling my leg. There's no contact on either side of the spine on her withers here. There's room all the way around. Now, a horse with taller withers, you'd have to be extremely cautious, because if their withers come up higher into the gullet and you put weight on, or you fasten the saddle down, it can come down more and pinch those withers. So you have to check all the way down the length of the gullet. Let's look from the back. There's no contact through that gullet. Now, while we're back here, check out the shape of these panels. They are wide and flat. They clear her spine, and like I said, cleared the area around the spinal processes and make contact on the meat, the muscle here. And the shape of these panels mirrors her back pretty darn well. She has a very flat, wide back here, while she has a fairly narrow and steep front end. So you need to make sure your rear panels mirror your horse's back and aren't too round or too flat. Next, you stick your hand in here behind the shoulder blade. Run your hand down the whole length of the saddle. You do this cinched up, do it with a rider on it. It should never feel like it's loose here, super tight right there, and then loose throughout. There shouldn't be any tight spots. It should feel very snug, but consistent throughout the whole panel. You need to be able to do the same thing underneath this panel along the length of the saddle. If you can run your hand up, try to demonstrate here the best I can. This is a very long flap, but if you run your hand up under the flap, you shouldn't feel any air gaps, any tight spots, no bulk, no nothing. It shouldn't dig in back here. It should be very consistent, even from front all the way through to the back. The goal is even PSI throughout the whole saddle panel. And finally, if you press on the cantle and pommel, I can't do it with two hands because I'm filming, but if you alternate that pressure, it should not rock back and forth. That would immediately tell you that most likely your tree is too banana shaped for your horse's back. She has a very flat back, so it took a while to find a very flat saddle that mirrored her back shape this way. You don't want bridging where you have a gap under the center of the saddle, and you don't want rocking where your saddle's too tippy. So I'm going to pause this and put my shim under here and show you how I'm going to shim my saddle until she builds that spring and summer meat back up, puts a little more weight back on, and builds her riding muscles up to fill in this front end. And a couple of things you need to be careful of with shims and with half pads. Okay, so I've got my half pad tossed up there. I'm going to do the same maneuver I did before, kind of shimmy until the saddle stops. That's right where it stops. Now, I immediately like this balance better. It brought the front end up just a little bit. I just have a small, thin foam shim up here in the front part of my saddle to fill in where her muscle loss from the winter is causing my saddle to tip. Now, I didn't get to show you this before, but when my saddle was tipped down a little bit in the front because it's slightly too wide, that caused my billets to angle back and away from her girth groove. And I don't know if you can see this, but she has a little bit of a forward girth groove. So if you see the shape of her belly, it's a little bulge back here like they all are. But then the flat, narrow spot, that's where your girth is going to go. It doesn't matter where you start your saddle or where you start your girth, it will end up in the narrowest, flattest spot. So now that I've put my shim under here and my saddle is seated down nice, it's not tipping, it feels like good contact, my billets are hanging just perfectly right in line with her narrowest, flattest spot. So my girth is going to naturally gravitate right there and not pull my saddle forward, which is a big concern with her due to her conformation. The saddle ends up coming over her shoulder blade. So with the shim and half pads, this is what I really want to caution people against. A lot of people think that the more padding the better, but frankly what can happen is as you put padding in the front of your saddle, you wind up choking down on their withers. So I have to be very careful not to put too much padding in here. because it will crowd her spine, her withers, and that can cause a lot of issues. It can cause pinch. Even if your saddle really had plenty of wither clearance, if you put a thick pad in here or several pads, you're going to lose that wither clearance. Same thing through the gullet. Sorry, got my finger in the way. All the way through the back, you still need to have that same clearance. So if you've got your pads on and they're impeding on your spine, your pads are doing more harm than good. Less padding is better. Try to get a saddle that fits as closely as possible and avoid needing extra padding. Like I said, this is temporary fix for slight weight changes during the winter. Lack of muscling. I don't ride her through the winter much, so she doesn't have the fitness, the muscle back here to lift the front of that saddle the way it will here in just a couple of months. She's going to look a whole lot different. So again, saddle's balanced front to back. Seat, the deepest part is in the center where I want it. The girth hangs right down into her girth groove. The shape of the tree fits her. Contours, everything matches really very well. Minus it's just a tad bit too wide due to her being slim. So just watch out for your pads on that. Just really make sure not only the top of your wither is safe from being squished by the saddle, but that the sides of your wither are safe too. Of course, most people these days are good about pulling their pads up into the gullet. Make sure it's nice and high. Keep all the pressure off that wither. But you know, if you have so much padding in there that you can't get it off the wither, you've got a problem. So get that fixed. Have a saddler or somebody help you find a better fit, a better solution. So hope that helps.